Thank you. Thank you, Polina. Thank you, Jun. Thank you, Pei Shan, for helping to set this up. Thank you all for being here today. And the latecomers as well. Thank you for coming in quietly. I want to start off today just to take a moment of silence for the victims of the Sichuan earthquake, and also for the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing. So let's just take a minute to pay our respects to them. Thank you. I never thought I would be addressing you, the esteemed members of the Oxford Union, without a guitar or an erhu, without my crazy stage hair, costumes. But I did perform at the O2 Arena in London last week. I'm not sure if any of you were able to make that, but in many ways that was similar to what I'm talking about today. That is, introducing Chinese pop music to you. See, I'm actually an ambassador for Chinese pop, whether I like it or not, both music and movies. And today, I'm here to give you the State of the Union address. It's not the Oxford Union, it's the Union of East and West. I want to frankly, openly, and honestly talk about how we've done a good job, or how we've done a bad job, of bringing Chinese pop to the West. And I also want to impress upon all of you here today the importance of that soft culture, that soft power exchange, and how each of us is involved in that exchange. Soft power, a term I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, coined by Rhodes scholar and Oxford alum Joseph Nye, is defined as the ability to attract and persuade. Shashi Tharoor called it in a recent TED Talk, the ability for a culture to tell a compelling story and to influence others to fall in love with it. I like that definition. But I want to put it in collegiate terms for all you students in the audience. The way I see it, East and West are kind of like freshman roommates. You don't know a lot about each other, but suddenly you're living together in the same room. And each one is scared that the other is going to steal its shower time or wants to party when the other one wants to study. It has the potential to be absolute hell, doesn't it? We've all had horror stories of that roommate. We've all heard about those stories. I know a lot of students here at Oxford have your own separate bedrooms. But when I was a freshman at Williams College, I was not so fortunate. You're kidding me. Woohoo! All right, great. Well, I had a roommate, and he was that roommate. Let's just call him Frank. So Frank was my roommate, and Frank liked nothing more than to smoke weed. And he did it every day. And Frank had a 2-foot-long bong under his bed that was constantly being fired up. For those Chinese speakers in the audience, Frank would hold Li Chuan Kai on that bong every day. All right. So I guess I was kind of the opposite of Bill Clinton, who tried marijuana but didn't inhale. See, I didn't try marijuana, but I did inhale. Every single day. Secondhand. And strangely enough, every time I'd go into our bedroom, I'd mysteriously end up late for class. I don't know how that happened. It was like, dude, is it already 10 o'clock? So, how many of you have lived with a Frank? Or could be a Frankette? Having a roommate can be a recipe for disaster, but it also has the potential for being the greatest friendship you've ever had. See, Frank, he didn't make it to second year. And I got 2 new roommates second year, Stefan and Jason. And to this day, the 3 of us are the best of friends. So going back to my analogy of East and West, as roommates, do we want to be Frank or do we want to be Stefan and Jason? And I think in this day and age, in 2013, we should all be striving for the latter, shouldn't we? I mean, I'm assuming that we all agree that this is the goal we should all be striving for. Now let's look at where we are in reality. Recent headlines in the media include Foreign Policy magazine. China's victim complex. Why are Chinese leaders so paranoid about the United States? Or the AFP, the Agence France Presse. Human rights in China worsening, U.S. finds. Bloomberg says, on the cover of this magazine, yes, the Chinese army is spying on you. And it's such a great one that I just wanted to show you the cover of the magazine. All right. Yes. Be very afraid. Okay? Was I showing that too right? Okay. So there's actually an extremely high amount of negativity, fear, and anxiety about China, Sinophobia, that I think is not just misinformed, but also misleading and ultimately dangerous, very dangerous. And what about how Westerners are viewed by Chinese? Well, we have terms for Westerners, the most common of which are guai lo in Cantonese, which means the old devil, lao wai, meaning the old outsider in Mandarin, ang mo, which means the red-haired one in Taiwanese. The list goes on and on. So, are these roommates headed for a best friend relationship? I think we need a little help. And as China rises to be a global power, I think it's more important than ever for us to be discerning about what we believe, because after all, I think that's the purpose of higher education, and that's why we're all here, to be able to think for ourselves and make our own decisions. China is not just those headlines, the burgeoning economy or the unique politics. It's not just the world's factory or the next big superpower. It's so much more. 1 billion people with rich culture, amazing stories, and as a product of both of those cultures, I want to help foster understanding between the two and help create that incredible relationship. Because knowing both sides of the coin, I really think that there is a love story waiting to be told, waiting to unfold. And I'm only half joking when I say love story, because I believe it is the stories that will save us, will bring us together. And my thesis statement for today's talk is that the relationship between the East and West needs to be and can be fixed via pop culture. That's a big fat claim, and I'm going to try and back it up. Now, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, "There are no languages required in the musical world. That is the power of music. That is the power of the heart. Through this promotion of arts, we can better understand the culture and civilizations of other people. In this era of instability and intolerance, we need to promote better understanding through the power of music." Now, the UN Secretary General thinks we need more music, and I think he's right. Music and arts have always played a key role in my life in building relationships, replacing what once was ignorance, fear, and hatred with acceptance, friendship, and even love. So I have a strong case for promoting music between cultures because it happened to me early in life. I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. I barely spoke a word of Chinese. I didn't know the difference between Taiwan or Thailand. It's true. I was as American as apple pie. Until one day, on the 3rd grade playground, the inevitable finally happened. I got teased for being Chinese. Now, every kid gets teased or made fun of on the playground, but this was fundamentally different, and I knew it right then and there. This kid, let's call him Brian McElroy. He started making fun of me, saying, "Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these." I can't believe you're laughing at that. That hurts. Okay, I'm just kidding. I can still remember how I felt. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. But I laughed along with him, with everyone. And I didn't know what else to do. It was like having an out-of-body experience, as if I could laugh at that Chinese kid on the playground with all the other Americans because I was one of them. Right? Wrong. On many levels. And I was facing, for the first, but definitely not the last time, the harsh reality that I was a minority in Rochester, which in those days had an Asian population of 1%. And I was confused. I wanted to punch Brian. I wanted to hurt him for putting me in that situation. But He was faster than me and he was stronger than me and he would have kicked my butt, and we both knew that. So I just took it in. And I didn't tell anyone or share with anyone these feelings. I just held them in and I let them fester. And those feelings would surface in a strangely therapeutic way for me through music. And it was no coincidence that around that time I started getting good at the violin and the guitar and the drums. And I would soon discover that by playing music or singing, other kids would, for a brief moment, forget about my race or color and accept me, and then be able to see me for who I truly am, a human being who's emotional, spiritual, curious about the world, and has a need for love just like everyone else. And by the 6th grade, guess who asked me if I would be the drummer for his band? Brian McElroy. And I said yes. And that's when we together formed our elementary school rock band called Nirvana. I'm not kidding, I was in a rock band called Nirvana before Kurt Cobain's Nirvana was ever known. So when Nirvana came out, Brian and I were like, hey, he's stealing our name. But really what attracted me to music at this young age was just this, and it's still what I love about music, is that it breaks down the walls between us and shows us so quickly the truth that we are much more alike than we are different. And then in high school, I learned that music wasn't just about connecting with others. Like Brian and I were connected through music. It was a powerful tool of influence and inspiration. Sam Nguyen was my high school janitor. He was an immigrant from Vietnam who barely spoke a word of English. Sam swept the floors and cleaned the bathrooms at our school for 20 years. And he never talked to the kids, and the kids never talked to Sam. But one day, before the opening night of our school's annual musical, he walked up to me holding a letter. And I was taken aback. I was thinking, why is Sam the janitor approaching me? And he gave me this letter that I've kept to this day. It was scrawled in a shaky hand, written in all capitals, and it read, "In all my years of working as a janitor at Sutherland, you're the first Asian boy to play the lead role. I'm going to bring my 6-year-old daughter to watch you perform tonight, because I want her to see that Asians can be inspiring." And that letter just floored me. I was 15 years old and I was absolutely stunned. That's the first time I realized how music was so important. With Brian, music helped two kids who were initially enemies become friends. But with Sam, music went beyond the one-on-one. It was an even higher level. It influenced others I didn't even know in ways I could never imagine. I can't tell you how grateful I am to Sam the janitor to this day. He really is one of the people who helped me discover my life's purpose. And I had no idea that something I did could mean more than I ever imagined to an immigrant from Vietnam who barely even spoke English. Pop culture, music, and the other methods of storytelling, movies, TV dramas, they are so key, and they do connect us, like me and Brian, and do influence us and inspire us. Then let's take another look at the State of the Union, the East-West Union with this soft power bias. How is the soft power exchange between these two roommates? Are there songs in English that have become hits in China? For sure. How about movies? Well, there are so many that China has had to limit the number of Hollywood movies imported into the country so that local films can even have a chance at success. What about the flip side of that? The Chinese songs that have hit in the West? Well, yeah. And movies. Well, there was Crouching Tiger. That was 13 years ago. And, well, I think there's a bit of an imbalance here. And I think it's a soft power deficit, let's call it that, when we look in this direction. That is to say, the West influences the East more than vice versa. And forgive me for using the East and West kind of loosely, but I think it's a lot easier to say this than the English-speaking language or the Asian-speaking language or the Chinese, or getting into specifics. I think I'm making generalizations, and I hope you can go with me on this. And is this intrinsically a problem, this imbalance in pop cultural influence? And I think so. I think in any healthy relationship or friendship or marriage, isn't it important for both sides to make an effort to understand the other, and that this exchange needs to have a healthy balance? And how do we address this? As an ambassador for Chinese pop music and movies, I have to ask myself the question, why does this deficit exist? Is it because Chinese music just is lame? And don't answer that, please. Yeah, I can just see someone being like, stop complaining and write a hit song. Psy did it, you know. But actually, there's truth in that. And the argument being that the content we've created just isn't as internationally competitive. And why should it be? Well, look at Korean pop. Look at K-pop, for example. Korea is an export-based economy, and they're outward-looking, and they must be outward-looking. Chinese pop, on the other hand, can just kind of stay domestic, tour all over China-speaking territories, and comfortably sustain. So when you're that big and powerful, there are over 160 cities in China with 1 million or more people. You tend to kind of turn inward and be complacent. So there certainly can be an argument made for Chinese pop being not marketed with international sensibilities in mind. But the other side of the argument, I think, is more interesting and thought-provoking and even more true, that Western ears aren't familiar with and therefore don't really understand how to appreciate Chinese music. Ouch. Okay. The reason I think that argument holds water, though, is because that's exactly what I went through. So I happen to know a thing or two about learning to appreciate Chinese pop as a Westerner. Because I was 17 years old when I went from being an Asian kid in America to being an American kid in Asia. And the entire paradigm suddenly got flipped on its head. I grew up listening to the Beastie Boys, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, and I found myself in Taiwan listening to the radio and thinking, where's the beat? Where are the screeching guitar solos? So here I am, this American kid in Asia, listening to Chinese music for the first time and thinking, this stuff is lame. I don't like it. I thought it was cheesy. Production value was low. The singers couldn't belt like Axl Rose or Mariah Carey. But then one day, I went to my first Chinese pop concert, and it was Yu Chenqing, Harlem U. Yeah, performing in the Taipei Shejiaoguan, the Taipei Music Center. And as he performed, I looked around at the audience and I saw their faces and the look in their eyes, the responsiveness to his music. And it was clear to me, finally, where the problem lay. It wasn't that the music was lacking, it was my ability to appreciate it and to hear it in the right way. The crowd, they would sing along and be totally immersed in his music, and I had this epiphany that I was missing the point, and from now on, I was going to somehow learn how to get it. I was going to learn how to hear with local ears, and I deconstructed and analyzed what it was that made Chinese audiences connect with certain types of melodies and rhythms and song structures and lyrics, and that's what I've been doing for the past almost 20 years. And it took me a long time, and I'm still learning, but at some point, I not only began to be able to appreciate the music, but I started being able to contribute to it and create my own fresh spins on the tried and true. And I think this happens to everyone, really, who's on the outside looking in. It always looks strange. If you look at things from your perspective, you're always going to think that these people are weirdos. What's wrong with them? Why are they listening to this stuff? And I'm saying that you can make an effort and get it. It can be done, and I'm living proof of that. And as an ambassador of Chinese pop, I'm trying to get people to open up to a sound that they may not feel is palatable at the first listen. So what else can we do to reduce this imbalance in our popular cultures? Well, maybe give a talk at the Oxford Union. Tour more outside of China. But seriously, actually, I think the tides are already starting to change. Very slowly, very cautiously, almost calculatingly. You see more cross-cultural exchange now, more interest in China, definitely. A lot of joint ventures, a lot of co-productions in recent years. Iron Man 3, Transformers 53. Resident Evil, really, it's beginning to be kind of like a world pop. And that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I'm focusing on these days. There was J-pop, there was K-pop, there was C-pop, and there's like this W-pop that's kind of starting to emerge, this world pop. And I think, yeah, I love that idea, that it's not world music. It's not like, there used to be a section in HMV called world music. That was like ethnomusicology class in college. No, but world pop is more about breaking and tearing down age-old stereotypes, the artificial confines that have kept us apart for way too long. It's a melting pot and it's a mosaic that even when we look up close, we'll still see the colors and the flavors of each culture in detail. And where can we go to listen to world pop? I don't think there's a world pop station or a magazine, unfortunately. There are none, there should be. But there is the internet, and YouTube has proven to be a driving force of world pop. Britain's Got Talent made Susan Boyle the hottest act in the world, and she achieved that not through the record labels or the networks, but through grassroots sharing. Gangnam Style is another great example of how that just took over and became a huge worldwide world pop phenomenon. So world pop also suggests a worldwide pop culture and something that can be shared by all of us and give us a lot of common ground. So today, what's my call to action? I want to help improve and promote the cultural exchange between the East and West, and I think I've made that clear, but how? I think you can all become pop singers, really. I think that's the answer. No, I'm just kidding. Unless that's what you really want to do. My call to action is this. Build and protect that roommate relationship between the East and West. Value this relationship and take ownership of it. Don't come to Oxford as an exchange student from Taiwan and only hang out with other Chinese students. Why would you do that? You could do that back in Wuhan or Nanjing or wherever you came from. Don't buy into the headlines or the stereotypes or into the hyper-nationalism. Think for yourselves. And this goes for the East and the West, both. Get to know one another and think for yourselves and don't believe the hype. For a moment, if we could just disregard the government and what the media is saying, just for the sake of argument, with our own tools of critical thinking, can we build relationships that actually see one another as individual human beings and not faceless members of a particular ethnicity or nationality? Of course we can do that. And that's the goal and dream, I think, of the romantic artist and the musician. I think it's always been that. And that's what I wish for. And that's what makes music and art so powerful and so true. It breaks down instantly, disintegrates all the artificial barriers that we've created between each other, government, nationality, black, brown, yellow, white, whatever color you are, and shows each other our hearts, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams. And it turns out, in the end, that the East isn't that far after all. And the West, well, the West ain't so wild. And through understanding each other's popular cultures, we gain insight into each other's hearts and true selves. And for those of you who are just beginning that journey to the West and East, I want to invite you today on this amazing journey with me. And I, as an experienced traveler on this road, on the West to East road, I prepared a mixtape for all of you today of 10 songs that I love. Here they are. That's a C-pop mixtape that you can check out. I was going to burn you all CDs, but my publicist reminded me lovingly that that would be illegal. So, and because I'm a professional recording artist, I shouldn't do that. But actually the link works out nicely because you get to see the music videos as well on a lot of these songs. And these guys, these 10 songs are songs that I love, and 10 different Chinese artists to start you off on getting to know and love Chinese pop. And I think these guys are awesome, and I hope you do too. And I just want to wrap up saying that being here in the Oxford campus really makes me nostalgic for my days at Williams. And when I look back on those 4 years, some of my fondest memories are spending time with my roommates, Stefan Papiano and Jason Price. And in fact, Jason is here in the audience today and made this special trip from London just to see me. And I suppose in the beginning we were strangers who didn't know much about the other. And sometimes we did compete for the shower, and there were times when we did intrude on each other's privacy. But I always loved listening to Stefan's stories about growing up in a Greek family and his opinions on what authentic Greek food really was. Or Jason's stories about wanting to make violins and to live in Cremona, Italy, like Antonio Stradivari. And he did do that. And I'll never forget, many years later, when I played a Jason Price handmade violin for the first time, and how that felt. They were always attentive and respectful when I'd tell them about what it was like for me growing up in a Chinese household with strict parents who made me study. So we shared stories, but the strongest bonds between us were formed just sitting around and listening to music together. And I really do see that as a model for East and West. So that's why I want to share Chinese music with you today, because it's the best way I know how to create the lasting friendships that transcend all barriers and allow us to know each other truly, authentically, and just as we are. Thank you.